The phone buzzed at 2 a.m., its screen casting a cold glow across my tiny Brooklyn apartment. "Elliot, I need you. Now." Caleb's voice, raw and commanding, sliced through the static, pulling me from a dream I couldn't recall but already missed. I was used to this being Caleb Winter's beta assistant meant my life revolved around his. As an alpha, he was New York's golden boy, CEO of Winter's Biotech, a trailblazer in pheromone therapy, and a man whose charm could unravel anyone. I managed his schedule, his ruts, his secrets, keeping his world seamless while mine frayed at the edges. For 3 years, I'd been his shadow, anticipating his needs before he voiced them. But tonight, something felt different. His voice held an edge. Not just urgency, but something deeper. Something that made my pulse race as I grabbed my coat and headed into the rain-soaked night. The city was alive, even at this hour. Neon lights smearing across wet pavement. I reached Caleb's penthouse in Manhattan's Flatiron district, the doorman nodding me through with a knowing look. Upstairs, Caleb stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, his silhouette sharp against the glittering skyline. His dark hair was disheveled, his shirt unbuttoned just enough to reveal the tension in his shoulders. He was in the early stages of a rut, the air thick with his pheromone spice cedar and something uniquely him. I'd handled his ruts before, ensuring privacy, meds, and discretion. But this time, his eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that stole my breath. "Elliot," he said, voice low, "I can't do this alone tonight." I swallowed, my beta instincts screaming to soothe him, to fix this. But there was a line we'd never crossed, a boundary I'd guarded fiercely despite the pull I'd felt since the day I met him. Caleb wasn't just my boss. He was my obsession, a dangerous truth I'd buried under spreadsheets and coffee runs. I stepped closer, handing him the suppressants I always carried. "You'll be fine," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Take these. I'll stay until you're through." He didn't take the pills. Instead, he grabbed my wrist, his touch searing. "I don't want the damn suppressants. Elliot, I need you." His words hung between us, heavy with meaning I wasn't ready to unpack. I pulled back, heart pounding, reminding myself of the rules. Betas don't get involved with alphas like Caleb. Not like this. Not when I was just his assistant, his fixer, his secret keeper. But Caleb's secrets weren't just about his ruts or his business deals. I knew about the late-night calls he took in hushed tones, the encrypted files he never explained, the way his eyes darkened when he thought no one was watching. I'd seen the man behind the CEO, the one who laughed at my terrible puns and lingered too long when our hands brushed. And I'd kept my own secret. I was in love with him. Had been for years, even as I pretended it was just loyalty. That night, I stayed. Not because of duty, but because I couldn't leave. We didn't cross that line out fully, but we came close. His hand in mine, his breath warm against my neck as we sat on his couch, the city humming below. He talked, more than he ever had, about his fears, his pressure to be perfect, his loneliness at the top. I listened, my heart breaking for the man who had everything but felt like he had nothing. By morning, the rut had passed, and so had the moment. Caleb was back to his polished self, thanking me with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I left, the weight of his touch lingering, knowing I'd crossed into dangerous territory. I told myself it was a one-time thing, a lapse in judgment. But deep down, I knew it was the beginning of something I couldn't control. Weeks passed, and our routine resumed. But the air between us had shifted. Meetings felt charged. His glances lingered, and I caught myself staring at the way his hands moved when he signed contracts. I was drowning in him, and it scared me. I'd always been the practical one Elliot Chun, the beta who never faltered. Born to Chinese immigrant parents in Queens, I'd clawed my way through NYU on scholarships, landing this job through sheer grit. I wasn't supposed to fall for my alpha boss, especially not one like Caleb, whose world was light years from mine. Then came the gala, a glittering event at the Met to celebrate Winters Biotech's latest breakthrough. I was there as his assistant, clipboard in hand, ensuring everything ran smoothly. Caleb, in a tailored tux, was magnetic, charming donors and dodging reporters. But when he pulled me aside, away from the crowd, his voice was soft. "Dance with me, Elliot." It wasn't a request. Before I could protest, his hand was on my waist, guiding me to the dance floor. The room blurred, the music a distant hum as we moved together. His scent enveloped me, and for a moment, I let myself believe this could be real. "You're more than my assistant," he whispered, his lips brushing my ear. "You know that, right?" I wanted to believe him. God, I did. But I knew the rules of his world. Alphas like Caleb married omegas, built perfect families, lived perfect lives. I was a beta, a cog in his machine, not someone he'd choose. Still, when he kissed me later that night in a shadowed corner of the museum, I didn't pull away. It was desperate, hungry, everything we'd both been holding back. And it changed everything. The next morning, I woke in his penthouse, his arm draped over me. Panic hit first, then guilt. I slipped out before he woke, leaving a note about a family emergency. I needed space, clarity, anything to stop the spiral. But the spiral had already begun, and I didn't even know it. I threw myself into work, pretending nothing had changed. Caleb didn't push, but his eyes followed me, searching for answers I didn't have. Then, 2 months later, I noticed the signs: fatigue, nausea, a strange sensitivity to his scent. I ignored it at first, blaming stress. Betas didn't get pregnant biologically. It was rare, almost impossible. But when I finally took a test, the 2 lines stared back at me. Undeniable. I was pregnant. With Caleb's child. A beta. Carrying an alpha's baby, a scandal that could ruin us both. I sat in my apartment, staring at the test, my mind racing. How had this happened? We'd been careful, or so I thought. But biology didn't care about my plans or his reputation. I thought of telling him. Imagine his reaction shock. Maybe anger. Maybe something softer. But Caleb was under pressure. His company facing a hostile takeover rumor. His every move watched. I couldn't add this to his plate. Not now. So I made a choice. I drafted my resignation letter, citing personal reasons. I'd disappear. Start over somewhere quiet. Raise the child alone. It was the practical thing. The beta thing. But as I typed, tears blurred the screen. I wasn't just leaving a job. I was leaving him. I left the letter on his desk after hours, my heart breaking with every step. I didn't say goodbye. I couldn't. But as I walked out of Winters Biotech for the last time, I felt the weight of his secrets. My secrets. And the life growing inside me. I thought I was done with Caleb Winters. I was wrong. The train to upstate New York rattled through the night, carrying me away from the city that had defined me. I'd chosen a small town called Hudson, far enough from Manhattan's chaos to breathe, close enough to feel like I hadn't abandoned my past entirely. My savings would cover a few months' rent in a modest cottage. But beyond that, I had no plan, just a positive pregnancy test and a heart full of regrets. I hadn't told Caleb. The resignation letter I'd left was clinical, detached, the kind of thing I'd written for him 100 times to fire someone else. Dear Mr. Winters, I am resigning effective immediately due to personal reasons. Thank you for the opportunity. No mention of the night at the gala. The kiss that burned through my defenses. Or the life we'd created in a moment of reckless passion. I turned off my phone, deleted my email, and vanished. But as the train hummed along, I couldn't escape the memory of his voice, his touch, the way he'd looked at me like I was more than just his assistant. Hudson was quiet, its main street lined with quaint shops and old brick buildings. I rented a small place with a view of the river, hoping the water's steady flow would calm the storm inside me. The first weeks were a blur of morning sickness and job applications. I avoided anything that might lead Caleb to Mino social media. No calls to old colleagues. But at night, alone, I'd trace my fingers over my still flat stomach, wondering what kind of parent I'd be, what kind of life I could give this child without its father. Then, one rainy afternoon, I saw him. I was at a local cafe, sipping tea to settle my stomach, when a black SUV pulled up outside. Caleb stepped out, his trench coat damp, his eyes scanning the street like a man on a mission. My heart stopped. How had he found me? I ducked behind my book, but it was too late. He walked in, his presence filling the small space. And when his gaze landed on me, it was like the world tilted. "Elliot," he said, voice rough with something I couldn't name: anger, relief, desperation. "You think you can just disappear?" I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. He sat across from me, uninvited, his scent wrapping around me like a memory I couldn't shake. "Why?" he asked, leaning forward. "Why didn't you tell me?" I clutched my mug, the warmth grounding me. "Tell you what," I said, stalling, but my voice cracked, betraying me. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper, me resignation letter, creased and worn like he'd read it 100 times. "This isn't you," he said. "You don't just walk away. Not from me." I wanted to scream that I hadn't walked away from him, but from the impossible future we could never have. I was a beta. He was an alpha. And now I was pregnant with a child that would complicate everything. But before I could speak, he leaned closer, his voice softening. "I know, Elliot. About the baby." The world stopped. "How?" I whispered, my throat tight. "Your medical records," he said, guilt flashing in his eyes. "I had to know why you left." I pulled some strings. Anger flared, hot and sharp. "You had no right." "I had every right." He snapped, then softened, his hand reaching for mine but stopping short. "You're carrying my child. Did you think I wouldn't care?" I pulled back, my heart pounding. "You have a company to run, Caleb. A life. I'm just. Don't." He cut me off, his voice fierce. "Don't you dare say you're just my assistant. You've never been just anything to me." The cafe faded away, the clink of cups and hum of conversation drowned out by the weight of his words. I wanted to believe him, to let myself fall into the hope he was offering. But fear held me back. "What do you want, Caleb?" I asked, barely above a whisper. "I want you," he said simply, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "I want us. The baby. You. All of it." It was everything I dreamed of hearing, but it felt too big, too fragile. I stood, grabbing my coat. "I need time," I said, and before he could argue, I walked out into the rain, leaving him behind. The next few days were torture. Caleb didn't leave Hudson. He rented a place nearby, showing up at the cafe, the grocery store, the riverfront, always at a distance, giving me space but never letting me forget he was there. I hated how much I wanted him to stay, how much I missed him, but I was scared off the future, of what this meant for our child, of whether I could trust him with my heart. One night, I found a package on my doorstep, a small journal, like the one I'd kept for his schedules. Inside, in Caleb's precise handwriting, were pages filled with his thoughts, his fears, his hopes. He'd written about the night at the gala, how he'd wanted to kiss me for months, how he'd been too afraid to admit he was falling for a beta. He wrote about the baby, how it terrified him but also made him want to be better, to be someone worthy of us. I cried reading it, my walls crumbling. The next morning, I called him. We met by the river, the air crisp with autumn. Why now? I asked, my voice shaking. Why fight for this now? Because I was an idiot, he said, stepping closer. I thought I could keep you at arm's length, keep my life separate. But when you left, I realized I can't do this without you. Not the company, not life, none of it. He reached for my hand, and this time, I didn't pull away. We stood there, the river flowing beside us. And for the first time, I let myself hope. Hope is a dangerous thing. It sneaks into your heart, makes you believe in possibilities you've spent years convincing yourself are impossible. Standing by the Hudson River with Caleb's hand in mine, I felt it fragile, warm, terrifying. But hope didn't erase the questions. Could an alpha like Caleb, with his penthouses and boardrooms, really build a life with a beta like me? And what about the child growing inside me? A child who'd be born into a world that judged us before it even knew us. We started small. Caleb stayed in Hudson, working remotely while I adjusted to the idea of us. We'd walk along the river, talking about everything and nothing, his childhood in Connecticut, my parents' noodle shop in Queens, the future we were too scared to name. He was patient, letting me set the pace, but I could see the hunger in his eyes, the same need I felt but wasn't ready to voice. One evening, he cooked dinner at my cottage, burning the chicken but nailing the mashed potatoes. We laughed, the sound filling the small space. And for a moment, I forgot the world outside. But the world didn't forget us. My phone buzzed with an email from a former colleague. Winters Biotech is in trouble. Hostile takeover confirmed. Where are you? My stomach dropped. I'd been so caught up in my own chaos. I hadn't realized Caleb was fighting a war on two fronts: our future and his company. I confronted him that night. Why didn't you tell me? I demanded, pacing the tiny living room. You're here playing house while your company's falling apart. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. Because I didn't want to lose you again. The takeover, it's bad. Elliot. They're using my personal life against me, digging into my ruts, my relationships. If they find out about the baby. He didn't finish. But I knew. A pregnant beta assistant wasn't just a scandal. It was ammunition. Caleb's rivals would paint him as reckless, unfit to lead. I felt sick. Not from the pregnancy, but from the weight of what we were up against. What do we do? I asked, my voice small. We fight, he said, his jaw tight. Together. Caleb returned to New York, and I went with him. Not as his assistant, but as his partner, though we hadn't defined it. His penthouse felt different now, less like a fortress and more like a home. We spent days strategizing, poring over legal documents, meeting with his lawyers. I was back in my element, organizing, planning. But this time it wasn't just for him, it was for us. The takeover was led by a rival alpha, Victor Kane, who'd always resented Caleb's success. Kane's team had leaked rumors about Caleb's unstable personal life, hinting at his ruts, his late-night calls, anything to make him look weak. When a tabloid published a grainy photo of us at the gala, captioned, "Winter's secret beta lover," I felt the world close in. My pregnancy wasn't public yet, but it was only a matter of time. Caleb was relentless, working 18-hour days to save his company. I watched him unravel. The confident alpha I'd known replaced by a man fighting for everything he'd built. One night, I found him on the balcony, staring at the city. "I'm failing," he said, voice raw. "I thought I could protect you. Protect the baby. But maybe I can't." I took his hand, pulling him back inside. "You're not failing," I said. "You're fighting. And I'm here." That night, we crossed the line we'd danced around for months. It wasn't like the gala, rushed and desperate. It was slow, deliberate, a promise we didn't need words for. Afterward, lying in his arms, I felt the first flutter of the baby moving, a tiny reminder of what we were building, not just fighting for. But the fight wasn't over. Kane's team escalated, hacking into Winter's biotech servers, leaking sensitive data. Caleb suspected an inside job, someone close betraying him. I remembered the encrypted files I'd seen as his assistant, the ones he'd never explained. What were they? I asked, cornering him in his office. He hesitated, then pulled up a hidden folder on his laptop. "Research," he said. "Pheromone therapy for betas. I was working on it in secret for you." I stared at him, stunned. The files detailed a project to help betas manage the emotional and physical toll of working with alphas, something no one else was researching. He'd started it after noticing how my body reacted to his ruts, how I'd push myself to keep up. "I wanted you to have a choice," he said, "to stay with me, not because you had to, but because you wanted to." Tears stung my eyes. All this time, I'd thought I was just his assistant. But he'd seen me, really seen me. We were interrupted by a call. Kane had scheduled a shareholder meeting to oust Caleb. We had 1 week to stop him. The shareholder meeting loomed like a storm cloud over Manhattan. Caleb and I worked around the clock, piecing together a defense. My pregnancy was starting to show, a small curve under my shirts that I hid with loose sweaters. Caleb noticed, though, his hand lingering on my stomach when we stole quiet moments. His eyes soft with something I was afraid to name love. Maybe, or something close to it. We uncovered the traitor, Sarah, Caleb's former CFO, who'd been feeding Kane information for months. She'd resented my role, my closeness to Caleb, and saw the takeover as her chance to climb. Confronting her was brutal. In a tense boardroom, Caleb laid out the evidence: emails, bank records, recorded calls. Sarah didn't deny it, just sneered. "You think you can play house with your beta and keep this company?" She spat. "You're weak, Caleb." I wanted to lunge at her, but Caleb's hand on my arm stopped me. "You're wrong," he said, his voice steady. "Elliot's my strength." Sarah was escorted out, but the damage was done. The shareholders were rattled, and Kane was ready to pounce. The night before the meeting, we sat in Caleb's office, exhausted but determined. "If we lose," he said, staring at the city lights, "I want you to know I'd give it all up for you and the baby." I shook my head. "We're not losing. You built this company, Caleb. We're fighting for it." He kissed me then, fierce and grounding, like he was pouring all his hope into me. "I don't deserve you," he whispered. "Yes, you do," I said, and for the first time, I believed it. The meeting was a battlefield. Kane strode in, all smug confidence, his presentation slick with accusations. Caleb was distracted, reckless, unfit. He flashed the gala photo, spinning a story about Caleb's inappropriate relationship with me. The shareholders murmured, some nodding. My stomach churned, not just from the baby, but from the weight of their judgment. Then Caleb stood. He didn't deny the relationship. Instead, he owned it. "Elliot Chun isn't just my assistant," he said, his voice clear. "He's my partner. In every sense. He's carrying my child." And I'm proud of that. If you think that makes me weak, you don't understand strength. The room went silent. I felt tears prick my eyes, but I held my head high. Caleb laid out his vision for Winter's biotech, the pheromone therapy project, the future he was fighting for, not just for himself, but for betas like me, for families like ours. He was raw, honest, vulnerable in a way alphas rarely were. And it worked. The shareholders voted to keep him. Narrowly, but enough. Kane stormed out. Defeated. The room erupted in applause. But Caleb only had eyes for me. He crossed the room, pulling me into his arms, not caring who saw. We did it. He whispered. No, I said, smiling through tears. You did. Months later, we stood in our new home in Hudson, a house big enough for 3. My pregnancy was full term now, the baby kicking like it couldn't wait to meet us. Winter's biotech was stable, the pheromone therapy project gaining traction. And Caleb was a changed man, not just an alpha, but a partner, a father-to-be. We didn't have all the answers. The world still judged us, whispered about the beta who'd tamed an alpha, the child who'd grow up in a spotlight we couldn't dim. But as Caleb held me, his hand resting on my stomach, I knew we'd face it together. The day our daughter was born, Caleb cried harder than I did. We named her Lily, after my mother, a reminder of where I'd come from and where we were going. Holding her, I looked at Caleb, his eyes bright with love, and realized this was the ending I'd never dared dream of: a family, a future, a love that didn't care about rules or roles. I'd been his perfect beta assistant, managing his ruts, his schedule, his secrets. But now, I was more his partner, his love, the father of his child. And that was the greatest secret of all, one we'd keep sharing, forever.